This week on the agenda, the green transition. As the world's biggest energy summit takes place in Abu Dhabi, are we ready for a post-carbon world? This week, energy ministers and experts from around the world gathered in the United Arab Emirates for the Abu Dhabi International Progressive Energy Congress, or ADIPEC. As climate change catastrophes continue to hit the headlines, the transition to a greener future was, of course, top of the agenda. Well, with me now is the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, Francesco. I wonder, how far off track do you think the global clean energy transition is?
We made this very clear. So last year was a record year of new renewable installed capacity. It was almost 300 gigawatts. But if we want to stay in a pathway that is consistent with the achievement of the 1.5 Celsius goal of the Paris Agreement, we have to scale up of 1,000 gigawatts per year. So we have to triple the installed capacity of renewables every year. We need to have 11,000 gigawatts of renewable installed capacity by 2030. Today, we have 3,000 gigawatts of renewable installed capacity. Just to make clear, this is a way to translate in a different language in terms of gigawatt the goal of the 43% of reduction of CO2 emission that is in the 1.5 report of the International Panel on Climate Change.
So to get back on track, let's talk about how to do it. And innovation, that's the buzzword, isn't it? But I wonder, what does that mean? What ideas would you like to see turned into action?
As Arena, we are trying to propose a new narrative. So what we think is that if we want to speed up and scale up the transition, we need to overcome existing barriers. We have identified three main barriers. One is the physical infrastructure. We need grids that are interconnected, flexible, and balanced. We need sea grid, sea routes, trade routes that take into account the new system, supporting new system that is coming. We need policies that design the new demand of in the market. A policy of the market design that are consistent for and facilitating the more renewable energy into the market. We talk about permitting, we talk about eliminating the subsidies, etc. And then we have also to enhance the institutional capacity. We have to train the skilled workforce that we need for putting more renewables into the ground.
And where in particular do you see scope for more global partnerships?
I think that there is this common sense that we have to act together. Here we have a private sector that is here as a government discussing how this could be possible. So we have also efforts in terms of financing. We also, as an Arena, we are implementing a new platform for investment, and we're already successful in facilitating investment in Central Asia and Africa. So all we are trying to set concrete action, concrete deliverable that will follow up the COP28.
If we need to decarbonise faster, where is at risk of being left behind?
Oh, that's an important question that you pose. Naturally, we always say that this transition should be just. What does it mean to be just? Not just to replace and provide for new jobs for the ones that are losing jobs in the old energy system. The just transition means using renewables, using the new technologies for having at the end of this travel a less unjust and fairer world. So just transition means to transit for an unequal world, for a world that is more equal.
Where do you think really needs to go faster and at scale? Which industries are we talking about? Is it buildings? Is it transport? Because those sectors are so big. it's hard to know where to start, where you'll make a dent in it.
So naturally, the question is not to start from sector to the others, but acting on all the sector. Naturally, you have been familiar with the work of Arena. We are insisting on the electrification of the end-use sector. So the heavy industries, transport, building as one of the priorities. We have identified hydrogen as a useful tool for decarbonize the heavy industry sector. So there are policies that can be tailored in the different reality. We have launched an initiative on Africa because Africa is important because now it's not contributing largely to the climate, but Africa is to grow. So we have to put development and the new energy system together, as this in Southeast Asia. So we have to move holistically and try to find the right measures for providing for a rapid decarbonization of the sector. For example, for energy, the eliminate methane. Methane is one of the things that we have to do faster, and so on and so on.
But price and costs, that continues to be a big issue, especially when it comes to how committed and to how fast the shift to renewable energy will be. How and when do you see that changing?
You know, that's what we've seen also looking at the COP28 is the more closer attention to the action instead of the pure negotiation that was a typical element of all the COP until now. We have seen the presidency looking at the financial aspects. We have seen a holistic approach to all this. Arena, together with UAE, Germany, Denmark, we have launched this African partnership with 10 African countries that want to go 100% renewables. So we see that the movement is there. The efforts are trying to be better coordinated. And we think, and we hope, that the COP28 will set the action framework for speeding the scale of the transition.
China's President Xi Jinping promised a shift towards greener overseas energy investments. I wonder where you see China's role in scaling up renewable energy.
You know, China has had an incredible role in pushing the world transition, providing panel at low cost with technologies and data. And just to give you a number, China in the first 6 months of this year has installed the same renewable capacity that's installed in all last year. More than 40% of jobs in renewables are in China. So the role of China cannot be questioned. It is leading in the energy transition. I would think that also in this new phase, the ambition of China to be pushing the world towards speeding the scale of the transition.
Now, I'm sure you have a very long shopping list, but if you could go to COP28 with one request, with one demand, what would it be?
It's impossible to concentrate in one. The other thing, international collaboration is rewrite the way international cooperation works, focusing the multilateral financial system in supporting the infrastructure needed for having more renewables into the grid. So this change of the way international cooperation works, if I have to say one word, is the one that I will say.
Francesco La Camera, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
The green transition is key for many of the world's smaller nations who suffer from some of the worst effects of climate change while contributing little to global emissions. So what more can be done to help the developing world? Joining me now is the Minister for Energy and Business Development for Barbados, Senator, the Honourable Lisa Cummins. Thanks for coming on the agenda. What do you hope to get out of this gathering at ADIPEC?
We're really hoping to be able to continue the process of building partnerships and relationships, but also facilitating the engagement around the key issues that are affecting the green energy transition, in particular for small countries like Barbados. We have a number of challenges that we're navigating. Prime Minister Motley has been on the global stage speaking to the issues of financing overall and how that has tied into the climate crisis. But here at ADIPEC, we are having a dedicated conversation around the energy transition, how the renewable energy goals that are being set by countries like ours coincide with the work that is being done now that wasn't done perhaps before, with the oil companies getting the energy industry, the traditional fossil fuel-based energy industry, on board with a renewable energy transition, and specifically adding the conversation around decarbonization to the global conversation. And that's been critical. And we're having those conversations here at ADIPEC.
There has been a lot of discussion at ADIPEC about further investment in oil and in gas. I mean, does that concern you, or do you think that really is still necessary?
That's a conversation that the oil companies are having, and that's important, I'm sure, for many countries to have that conversation, especially as we deal with the questions of equity and access, and in particular in poor countries. In the case of Barbados, we have an ambition for net zero in terms of our transition. We are pushing forward with a renewable energy agenda. We accept that fossil fuels will be around in some form along the way. What is important for us is to have the investment in the renewables. And what are the renewables that are important to us? Solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, hydrogen is a huge area of opportunity for us, in particular in the small island developing states of the Caribbean. We want to be able to see more investment in those areas as well. So financing is important, yes, but what are we financing? We also, for the energy transition, need to finance access to the products, the technology, and the services that are critical to be able to build a renewable energy transition for small economies. That's important to us.
Let's talk about your goals, about Barbados's goals, because earlier this year, it was reported that Barbados's plans to be 100% carbon neutral by 2030 were being hampered by just those things: financing, access, and supply delays. Is that still the case? If it is, how long is it going to last?
It's absolutely the reality that we're facing. So, for example, during the pandemic, we continue to pace our target. I know many countries have a 2050 target, a 2035 target. Barbados has a 2030 target. And so we have 7 years in our transition plan that we are working through now. So we had to undertake during the course of earlier this year, we launched an assessment of where exactly we are. And what are some of the challenges that we were facing that we needed to mitigate against and we need to solve for? And one of the key issues, as you mentioned, was a supply chain. So, for example, we have a challenge of adding storage into the mix, battery storage in particular. We had a supply chain, and we still have a supply chain issue, 18 to 24 months wait time because of issues on the global supply chain on the manufacturing side and then on the logistics side to add storage to our mix. We've had issues for those that have already gone past a certain point with their projects to be able to secure transformers, synchronous condensers, inverters. Those are things that have plagued Barbados and countries like ours who are not the manufacturers, who are not the location where assembly plants are based. And we have had to wait in many instances behind larger economies because their volumes are larger, their orders are larger. And so we get kicked to the back of the queue while our transition goals have a much higher level of ambition in terms of timeline. So those things are very much still affecting us. But are we going to retreat from the goals that we have set for ourselves? Absolutely not. Our Prime Minister has been advocating, as you know, for the Bridgetown Initiative. That's on the financing side. We've been advocating for the reform of the international financial institutions to ensure we have access to capital, patient capital at affordable rates. Yeah. We're advocating for that. And on our side, for the energy team, that's why fora like this here in ADIPEC really become even more important so that our voices get heard right alongside larger, more advanced economies.
You mentioned there that countries like yours being pushed to the back of the queue. So does the world's smaller nations like Barbados get enough help with the green transition?
Arguably, the answer to that is immediately no. We don't get enough support in the energy transition that we're advocating for. But in so many other areas, and globally in international relations, international development policy, international economic policy, there is a constant theme all the time that we're not being heard to the extent that we want to be heard. But we can't step away from the table, and we're not going to step away from the table. And so that's why you'll see the countries of the Caribbean, the small island developing states in all of our groups, and the African group as well, making sure that we are present, we're sitting at the table, we're part of the policy development process, and we're advocating in every possible forum to ensure that our needs are not just heard, but that they're met.
Countries like yours have very little to do with the causes of climate change.
Absolutely.
But you face the brunt of some of that extreme weather and those big weather events. So what needs to be done to address that?
So Prime Minister Motley, for example, she's been talking about the road to COP28. And one of the things that she has been very clear on, we do not have the time. I think this was a point that was made in Glasgow. She continued it in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it will continue, no doubt, to Abu Dhabi, to Dubai in just a few weeks. This is no longer the time for promises. It's a time for action. We have to be able to have clear, actionable outcomes coming out of COP. And why? We have temperatures, certainly across Barbados. We've seen our hottest day in the history in Barbados over the last week. We've seen that happening in other economies as well. So the fact that we need to make changes at 1.5 to stay alive that we've been talking about since Glasgow is a reality. And so, yes, we have to make those changes now. We have to make sure that the multilateral fora that we're a part of, that they're committing to the things that are critical and are necessary for countries like ours. So the energy transition is intimately connected very much into the climate conversation and the work that is being done here in ADIPEC, in the international agencies with responsibility for the energy, but also critically on the climate side in terms of reducing carbon emissions and reducing our footprint.
What do you think it's going to take for the world to start to take climate financing seriously enough to actually do something?
Well, I think Prime Minister and Barbados Bridgetown Initiative, for example, is a classic case of how we have packaged the approach to climate financing and to financing for developing countries overall. That's the financing part of it, and the reform of the financial institutions who are responsible for providing capital. Equally, on our side, one of the things that we've been speaking about is ensuring that there are platforms for procurement. So Barbados should not have to be challenged by an 18 to 24-month wait time for battery storage, when perhaps we could be able to wait 6 months or less to be able to have that onboarded onto our system. So what is needed at this stage, in our view, is the financing, yes, and we're advocating for that, but we want to balance that and match that, I should say, with a procurement platform that is collaborative among the global south that allows countries like ours to be able to have access to the critical technology, equipment, and transformational agenda items that are necessary for us to be able to implement the energy transition. Implementation is key, and financing is a part of that, but so is procurement, so is access, so is the transfer of technology, and then ultimately the development of an economy that is based on new skills and the future of an energy industry that is built on young people and inclusion.
You mentioned procurement, you mentioned developing skills there. So talk to me about the changing role you see for business as part of not just this conversation, but in terms of the whole climate debate.
So that's such an important bit, because Barbados, for example, and the countries in the Caribbean, we are collectively around 15 million people strong. That's smaller than some countries that are leading much of the conversation. So we're not the location where businesses will come to headquarter manufacturing capacity. We're never going to be the location where they're coming to have assembly capacity. And the consequence of that is that much of that business is headquartered offshore. Equally, the research and development that's taking place in many businesses, that's also taking place offshore. What we do need is to be able to find businesses that are going to hub facilities in countries like the small island developing states, like the developing states, that make it easier for us to access the frontier for procurement so that we're not having the issues. And I'll give you the example. When COVID was with us and we were having difficulty accessing vaccines and COVID equipment and ventilators and so on, we had no end of challenges. And the Global South coalesced around two main platforms where we were able to, one, procure and identify what our needs were in each individual country, and then deploy those resources to the countries as they needed them. The same thing principally needs to be done with business, partnering with the international financial institutions, with the countries that are the anchors and the hubs for assembly, manufacturing, research and development, and the countries that need to be able to procure them, all in a single compact that allows us to have access in a time that makes sense for us in terms of implementation for the energy transition. All of that is what I'm hoping that we can get out of these conversations.
Senator Lisa Cummins, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Still to come here on the agenda. Is COP28 the world's last chance to save the planet? We'll speak to the UAE's energy minister to find out.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. The ADIPEC gathering, as we've heard, is serving as something of a prelude to the UAE's hosting the UN Climate Change Conference COP28 from the end of November. Well, with me now is the Energy Minister of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Suhail Mohammed Faraj Al Mazrouei. You're going to be the host of COP28 later this year. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, first of all, what we are hoping to achieve is to bring a more inclusive group of governments, as we are putting in front of them a proposal to work together on something that is tangible and measurable. And what we are aiming for is to triple the capacity of renewable energy worldwide. And that's something that we have committed to this summer with our first update of our energy strategy 2050. The UAE have committed to triple the capacity of renewable energy by the year 2030, and as well to produce the fuel of the future, which is hydrogen, at a capacity of 1.4 million ton. That is going to be feeding some of the high emission industrial sites in the UAE.
It's interesting that you talk about wanting there to be some tangible results. How are you going to ensure that?
I think we have more chance now, as the world is seeing the climate change effects. It's not an opinion. It's not a myth. It's something that we are seeing and we need to address. We are optimistic. For example, in the oil and gas sector, the commitment that we have seen here in ADIPEC from the oil and gas companies give us some assurance that everyone is keen to do their best to reduce emissions. Some of the technologies that as well we are seeing in capturing and CO2 and using it as a product rather than just dispose of it underground give us hope that more large-scale projects we will see in different parts of the world. Of course, one of the major challenges is the financing, and we are hoping that the commitment from the major economies is going to be there to finance the transition in many parts of the world.
I wonder also about the location, because some critics have said, you know, it's a strange place to host a climate conference, isn't it? We're a place with so many ties to fossil fuels. What do you say to that?
Well, what I say to that during transition, we will need the existing base load energies, and those happen to be that big chunk of that, whether we like it or not, is fossil fuel. So now the challenge is to keep producing the required volumes during the transition so we can transit at a cost that is allowing the transition to happen. If the resources are not available, be it gas, be it oil, then we will not be transitioning swiftly to the 2050 targets of net zero. And the UAE is trying to work on a dual track. One is to show the world and show the region here what we are doing to our energy mix. We are transitioning by 2030 30% of our energy mix will be clean. By 2035, 38%. And we are committing to net zero by 2050. But at the same time, we have a requirement to invest in bringing resources to ensure that the reliable sources of of energy are there. And the UAE is investing to increase its production to 5 million barrels by 2027 to ensure that we don't see hikes in the prices that will hurt consumers in the developing nations, and it will hurt also or hinder the pace of transition.
So you've talked about countries' commitments there, and yours in particular, but what about the role of business? Because the president delegate of COP28, Sultan Al Jaber, he said that oil and gas companies have got to be central to the solution of fighting climate change. So how's that going to happen? How's it going to work?
Well, as I mentioned, at the beginning of ADIPEC, we took a commitment from the major IOCs and NOCs to stop or eliminate the methane production, and we have seen an unprecedented support for that initiative. For example, our national oil company have, as a country, we are committing to net zero by 2050, but ADNOC have decided to go with a net zero by 2045. And that's a commitment. Our national oil company today have signed this year to go to stop all of the power generation from fossil and use clean energy sources to power all of its operation. So we are producing relatively the cleanest barrel in the world. And I think there is a potential that the other companies can do the same. And by doing that, we are reducing significantly the carbon footprint from this industry. This industry have enormous engineering skills. It has enormous services. And I think the talent in the young people that we have seen in ADIPEC Awards, for example, showing us companies from all over the world doing R&D and utilizing the CO2 and use it in terms of just disposing of it underground. All of these coming from the oil and gas companies. And I am hopeful that more interaction with the oil and gas companies will lead to a swifter and a fair and just transition.
So looking ahead to COP28, if there was one message that you have to all of those who's going to be gathering there, what's that message going to be?
Well, the message is we need consolidation, we need solidarity, and we need to think that everyone or every industry matters. Every industry needs to come forward with their plans. And my message to the governments and to the ministers, come up with a long-term strategies. Don't come up with a 5 years. It doesn't help. If we are serious about the climate change, we need to put strategies, and we need to ensure that the consumers are in the center of those strategies.
Your Excellency, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok.
Coming up on a future agenda, cultural collaboration. We'll speak to Oscar-winning Chinese artist Tim Yip. But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.